everyone, my name is Melissa Parks. I have my PhD in clinical and health psychology, and I've been working with the expat community for the past almost 6 years now. I started working with the expat community when I was living abroad myself, and now I work as a coach, working with clients who are living abroad or who have recently moved home. And this month I'm focusing on providing material, providing content for that group of people who are either have recently moved home or who are possibly moving home in the near future and want some support around that. Because unfortunately, you might find a lot of tips and tools about how to adjust to living abroad, but there just isn't enough, in my opinion, enough resources out there for people who are adjusting to moving back home. And it can be a challenging process, and I know myself because I went through it last year, and I've supported many clients through the process too. So I've already done a couple of videos about things that can help with that process of moving home, and today I want to talk about a few things that can make it more challenging. Actually, 5 things that can make this process a more challenging process, and hopefully that might give you some ideas as well of what you can do to maybe limit some of these factors that make it more challenging. So one of those things is a move back home is going to always be more challenging if you move when you are absolutely fed up with living abroad. And you might be surprised about that because many people do move back to their home country when they're just completely done with living abroad. But really what works best is when you can move home when you're in that sweet spot. When you know that you can make that country abroad your home, you're still enjoying it, and you're actually a little bit sad to leave. And now that's because often if you're moving home because you just got to get out of the country and you can't handle living there anymore, you can't handle living abroad anymore, you might have too high of expectations of what it's going to be like when you get back home. You might be disappointed with the fact that home has changed and you've changed. So just thinking about that, when possible, if you could make that move home at a time when you aren't completely fed up and it's maybe even just a little bit sad to say goodbye. So that's one piece of it. Another thing is moving home can be much more challenging if you don't have a choice in the process. And sometimes this is something that's completely uncontrollable, right? You know, somebody in your family might be ill. You might be because of a visa, residency difficulties that you need to leave because of job changes. Or as I'm filming this right now, we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, and that's forcing a lot of people to move home as well who weren't expecting to. That makes it more challenging. It absolutely does. So if you are in a situation where you're able to make the choice to move home, that's just going to give you so much more of a sense of control, and it will just make the grieving process a little bit more smooth. It's not impossible to adjust if you are forced to go home. It just might take you a little bit longer, and it's important to bring in some self-compassion there. Another thing that can make it really challenging to move home is if you expect that you need to check your global citizen identity at the door when you come back into your home country. And that's because, part of like that piece of being abroad is it's changed you. And so I think if you can move back to a place where you can bring pieces of that identity or pieces of the life you had abroad back to the home that you're living in, that is so ideal. So for instance, I know for me something that was really important was to move back to my home country and live in a city that was lived in a part of my city that was relatively walkable, because I'd been living for so many years without a car and with access to cafes and restaurants and really good public transportation. So of course it wasn't going to be the same in my home country, and I've dealt with a fair share of disappointments about that. But if you can find some of those just little pieces of things that have been important to you living abroad and bring those back home with you, that will help. And if not, if it's a really abrupt change, it just will make the transition much more challenging. Another piece of it that's really important that's really going to make it harder if you do this is if every time you feel sad or something, you have a time where you feel out of place or people don't get you or they don't want to hear about your time living abroad, or you start having doubts about it, it's going to be so much harder if in that moment you tell yourself that you made a mistake, that you made a wrong decision. So I see a lot of my clients doing this, right? It's like they'll get in touch with me because they're like, I think I made a big mistake. I need to go back. Or maybe even before they moved back home, they're starting to doubt it and they feel like that's just proof they made a mistake. And that's not true. I mean, these are big life transitions. It's normal to feel fear and anxiety and sadness. It's a grieving process again. So there's gonna be a roller coaster of emotions there. So really being kind, being gentle, being patient with yourself as you're going through this process is gonna make it smoother. And then the last piece I wanted to talk about with you is it's gonna be that much harder if you feel like you need to go it all on your own. And again, this is something I see a lot of my clients doing is, I don't have people to talk to about this. I don't, thankfully my clients, when they're reaching out to me, they've gotten to that place where they've accepted, I need to reach out for professional support. Reaching out for professional support is amazing. If you can work with a therapist or a coach who gets this process, I would absolutely recommend that. You don't need to do it alone. Yes, you're independent and you lived abroad, and I'm sure you're independent in many ways of many areas of your life, but independence and asking for help aren't mutually exclusive ideas. So reaching out to a professional, reaching out to other internationals who get it, that can be really helpful as well, whether it's an expat Facebook group or finding a meetup in your local area. That can be incredibly helpful. So think about those 5 things. If you have any control over those, I would really encourage you to see if you can minimize them and work around them so that they don't make your repatriation process harder than it needs to be, because it already is a challenging process. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on these ideas. If there's something else that you've noticed made your own repatriation difficult, or I'd love to hear too just your own journey, your own story of moving home. I hope you're doing really well, staying healthy wherever in the world you are. Take care. Talk to you soon.